Well, everyone, welcome to another episode of Legitimate Matters. This is William Paris. I am your host. We have a great show this evening. Many of us have been blindsided by this thing called coronavirus. And hundreds of thousands of people, unfortunately, have lost their lives. Millions of people are unemployed. And to make matters even worse, industries have been completely devastated. Well, this evening, we're going to answer so many questions that people have about particularly the hospitality industry, which has been devastated. My guests this evening are Robert Gilbert and Timothy Wiersma. And Robert Gilbert is president and CEO of the Hospitality Sales and Marketing Association International. And as president and CEO of the HSMAI, Robert Gilbert has been guiding HSMAI through a dynamic and exciting period of change as the 7,000 plus member organization has been reestablished globally to grow the revenue for hotels through sales, marketing, and revenue optimization. My other guest, Timothy Wiersma, is principal at Revenue Generation LLC. And with more than 2 decades of experience in the hospitality industry, Tim Wiersma is recognized as a leader in revenue management, specializing in property and portfolio revenue management, sales, marketing, distressed asset turnaround, and asset assessment. He consistently delivers results for properties around the world. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Thank you, William. Nice to be here.
You?
Now, when I first heard the word, guys, coronavirus, I didn't really know what it was, and I didn't take it very seriously. But suddenly I heard that Broadway was closed. They closed the theaters. And that for me was my defining moment. That's when I said, oh, wow, this is really serious. And I couldn't really wrap my brain around what was really going on. Bob, was there a moment that when it really hit you and you understood the magnitude of what was happening?
Well, yeah, William, I think we all had those defining moments in our lives. You know, as a nonprofit association, we have a lot of the events we do are live events, conferences and meetings. And so most of myself and most of our team are traveling on the road all the time. I was actually getting ready to leave on a trip for London that I canceled about 2 days out. And I think the defining moment was I can't go because I may not get back out of there because that's when the quarantine was shutting down. And within an hour of that decision, I talked to a couple of our executive committee members about an event we were having less than 2 weeks from now. And they said, we've been put down on lockdown, non-essential travel for our hotel companies, and I'm not going to be able to come. You're not going to be able to have the meeting. And usually if you're in the hospitality business and travel business, the last thing you're going to do is cancel one of your own meetings. But when your own attendees are not able to get there, I realized this is much bigger than we originally thought.
Right, that absolutely puts a different spin on it. People canceling, flights were canceling, and even if you traveled, you didn't even know if you were going to make it back into the States. Tim, Tim, I found it really shocking when I heard that hotels were actually closing. As a matter of fact, I went into Midtown and I was in Times Square at one point, and I went into a hotel lobby, big hotel, and it was empty. There was not one single guest in the entire lobby. As a revenue expert, Was there a moment for you when you were thinking or asking yourself, what does this mean?
Yeah, for me personally, I was affected by hotels closing. I was scheduled to go to a meeting in Germany, and it was a large conference. And 2 days from departure, I find out that they canceled the conference, and several of the hotels there were closing down. Basically, the government shut down the conference, and
Oh,
they basically shut down the country. And that was the turning point for me, where I realized this is something much different than 9/11. This is something much different than the last turn down. Has lasting impacts that will impact us for years to come. Just trying to understand what a pandemic is all about, because in my lifetime, we've had diseases and so on that affected us, but nothing like coronavirus. And what went through my mind is this is this is going to be very impactful from a revenue standpoint. Um, Supply is going to change. People are going to lose their jobs, and the way we manage revenue, the way we price, the way we manage inventory, is going to change significantly from this point forward, and it certainly did.
and you were talking about people losing their jobs. And of course, we know uh, countless numbers of hotel employees across the country and, of course, around the world have either just completely lost their jobs, they've been furloughed. Do we have any estimates, any numbers of just what we're talking about in terms of job loss?
Well, we do, William, and I think sometimes the numbers don't do it justice. If you put it in percentages, it's a little more, you're able to consume a little bit better. But keep in mind that hospitality and travel is one of the third largest employers in the world. And it's a labor-intensive industry by the nature of what we do. But in the US alone, within a matter of 3 weeks, 70% of the hotel workforce had been furloughed or laid off. So put that in perspective, for an entire industry, 70%, that's 70, has been laid off or furloughed. When you put it in numbers, the numbers are big, but that 70%, I think, tells the story.
Sure.
Globally, we're talking about, about 100 and 700 and I'm sorry, 197 million people globally have been furloughed or laid off. In the U.S. alone, it was 7.7 million, and so that's a huge impact in the
Sure.
hotel business. It's not only our members at HSMAI that are directly involved in the revenue generation functions of sales, marketing, and revenue optimization, but the masses of employees at hotels are in the frontline positions and working in restaurants and the front desk and the bell staff and the housekeeping staff and the kitchen staff. I mean, these are hourly employees that are living paycheck to paycheck. So the numbers are just staggering for the hotel industry.
Wow, I knew it was pretty bad, and I didn't realize it was 70%. But when you consider the impact that the coronavirus has had on the industry, it's really not surprising. And then now we're looking at some hotels actually managed to stay open. I know one particular hotel here in New York, a boutique hotel that managed to stay open, and they were running a decent occupancy, and that was because they were accommodating the first responders and people that were essential services, healthcare workers. So they survived in that way. But for those hotels that were able to stay open, do we have an average or an idea of what the occupancy rates are, RevPAR across the nation? Is there an average?
Yes, I've been watching it very closely. As soon as the results come out on a weekly basis from a company called Smith Travel Research. And they published the occupancy for the industry in the U.S. Last week. Occupancy grew to 39.3%, and that's down 45.3% from the previous year. So you can see the significant decline there. Average rate is down about 36%, and overall RevPAR last week was down 65%. But that is actually showing a nice progression for the last 8 or 9 weeks. Kind of the low point was the week of April 5th, where occupancy was at 22%, when pretty much everything was shut down. People were staying at home. There's no travel at all. Interestingly enough, the top 25 markets, the New York, San Francisco, Chicago, and so on, they're running a little bit behind the industry average, running at about 35.4%. But it's worth noting that 7 of those markets, the occupancy levels were at 40% or higher. There are certain markets like Oahu, Orlando, and Boston, where their occupancies are still in the teens or in the 20s. In Orlando, Disneyland still closed down, no conventions going on there. Boston, quite a few properties are actually closed still there. And Oahu, just, the islands are pretty much still shut down. They're only running at 11% occupancy. The travel also does forecasts, and they've been revising forecasts for 2020. So just to give you an idea, last year's occupancy was 66% for the industry. Right now, they're forecasting occupancy to be 35.8% for the year. That includes the 2 months that we were running normal occupancy levels. Average rate down. Last year we ran 131. This year we'll run about 103. And overall revenue per available room last year was 86. This year we're looking at a $36 overall revenue per available room. So down significantly, and that's certainly reasons why we're seeing so many changes in the industry right now.
Well, William, if I can jump in, I think it's
Please.
important for your listeners to keep that in contrast, as Tim alluded to. The annual occupancy for the hotel industry in the U.S. is typically between 65 and 70%. So to drop to 20% in a matter of weeks is massive, and even with the forecasted occupancy for this year that Tim talked about, the hotel industry is pretty capital intensive. There typically will be at a gross operating profit at about 45% occupancy. It's just break even from the industry. So to think that the industry has plummeted to lows never recorded in the history, as low as 20% or in 10%, like in some markets like in Hawaii right now, that just tells you that the industry, there are sectors of the industry that are just totally devastated. But it's that decline in occupancy that obviously drives your operators to making staffing changes and things like that, because many owners of hotel real estate just don't have the liquidity to even begin to keep these hotels open. So the scale of this drop in demand is significant for an industry like the hotel industry.
Absolutely. And when we start talking about any idea or a sense of recovery, what does that look like? And can you look at previous economic crises that we've experienced? And is there anything that we can apply to some type of an action plan, or are we just completely finding our way in the dark at this point?
No easy to answer that one. I mean, I'll throw my 2 cents, and then Tim, you can jump in. But the short answer is no. Never in the history of the hotel industry has there been anything like this before. A lot of economists have looked at the last 3 recessions we've seen, traumatic events like 9/11 and so forth, where there's a sharp decline in demand for hotel rooms, but never anything like this. This is really significant. So we've never seen anything like it. But
I think it's important for viewers and even those that are not in the industry to also understand that the hospitality industry, the hotel industry specifically, is resilient. And even though we're talking about these numbers now and we are experiencing such devastation, I think it's important to understand that the industry will absolutely bounce back. And I think it's a matter of just really building travel consumers' confidence that if they do, when they do travel, that they will be safe. And HSMAI, Hospitality Sales and Marketing Association International, has, this is what you do as an organization to manage. Bob, why don't you tell us more about HSMAI and how and what the role is and how this helps the industry?
Sure, happy to. The association, our mission simply is to help hotels grow their revenue through sales, marketing, and revenue optimization. So that's what we do. Our members are professionals with hotel companies and at hotels directly. That's what they do for a living. So if you look at trying to figure out what to do, what our members are looking for right now is what should they be doing today in their jobs, and how should they be preparing for the recovery? Because being responsible for the revenue generation of hotels, these are the individuals that are going to be leading the recovery. So they're really at the front lines of what do they do? How do they pivot? How do they re-strategize? What do you do? And you can look at all the history and the trends ever recorded, but there's really no playbook for what to do in a situation like this. So you really have to go back to the fundamentals of marketing, which is what's the customer doing? And as an association, one of the things we're keeping a really close eye on right now is customer sentiment. Exactly what sectors, what's driving consumer behavior now, and the overarching sentiment right now is there's three things consumers are looking for to determine whether or not they're going to travel again. And that is one, health, their own health and the health of others. Two is their own financial security. Are they able, or is their company able to afford them to go? And three, you said this earlier, safety. Is it going to be safe to travel? And there's two major headwinds facing the industry that sales and marketers have to overcome, and that really is the economic tidal wave that this pandemic is going to be leaving our entire economy in, and then secondly is going to be the continued battle for the virus itself. So the hotel industry looks at business basically in three big general buckets, and that's going to be the leisure business, corporate business, and then meetings and conventions. Fortunately, some of the growth that Tim outlined, we're already seeing being driven primarily by leisure traffic. Memorial Day weekend, some of the hotels that were reopened, particularly beach resorts, many of them were sold out for the weekend. That was all great. The corporate business is projected to be the next one to slowly return, and the meetings and conventions business will probably be the last sector to really return to any sense of normalcy. But it's the most complex business there is, because now hotels have to reconfigure their seating configurations of how will they account for social distancing when you're accommodating groups and conventions. That's different by state, different by municipality, and different by country. So there's a lot of things to figure out before we're going to get back to any business as normal by any stretch.
Well, for the viewers that are not in the industry, I think that what you just explained really describes the complexity of the industry. It goes so much further than a traveler on vacation checking in and staying in a beautiful hotel. There's a lot of moving parts and components. And you actually have, or HSMAI has put together a online global conference to really address all of these concerns. Can you tell us about that?
I think Tim and I both can. Tim also is chair of our revenue management advisory board, so there's some of the brain trust behind this this whole event we're doing. But we normally have a big conference called the Revenue Optimization Conference, or ROC, and we do it in 5 markets around the globe. The one here in the U.S. was scheduled for June 17th, and obviously that was not going to happen. It's one of the largest gathering of hotel revenue optimization thought leaders in the world. We've rescheduled that for October, which is the good news, but we were trying to think of what can we do now, because people are desperate right now for the ability to exchange best practices and monitor the trends that are going on and talk about the implications of those. So our advisory board and the team came up with this concept of ROC Home, which basically is a day dedicated to revenue strategy recovery. And we're encouraging all of our members and the industry at large all over the world world to really take the day to dedicate to design to your strategy and to pivot your strategy for what's best for your hotel or your hotel company and your markets. And so to do that, we put together a lot of tools and resources. We're supplementing that with some live events that will be broadcast live for about 24 hours, starting from Sydney and Singapore all the way through Dubai, Europe, and here in the US, with leading economists and subject matter experts in every market around the globe doing live webinars throughout the day that people can log into and apply to whatever their strategy recovery plan is. So that at a high level, that's what ROC Home is. So we're really excited about that. We had a couple thousand registrations as of this morning, and we don't know how big it's going to get, but it's going to be huge by the time we get to next Wednesday.
Do you have a target of numbers that you're hoping for?
This is not one of those things you can benchmark. I mean, we really had no idea what it would be to begin with. We could very well easily end up with 5,000 or 6,000 people engaged in this. It's one of the many programs going on around the world by the time we get to next Wednesday.
Well, I looked at the program and I looked at all of the different segments. I think it's extremely thorough and so well done. There was one component that was added, which is Dr. Janelle McCauley, and that was mindfulness. And while all of this is going on, I thought that was so appropriate. Why was that included?
Well, we originally had Dr. McCauley scheduled for our ROC conference in June, and we asked her if she could put together a half an hour speech, basically. And this is something, the timeliness is even more amazing now with COVID, where she talks about mindfulness. If you don't know Dr. McCauley, she used to work for the Navy, and she was a pilot. And she worked under very stressful situations. And she learned a technique in mindfulness. And she lived that in her work, in her entire life. In very stressful situations, it really helped her get through some very tough times. And certainly as an industry, as professionals, we're under a pressure cooker right now, and we're feeling that pressure. And there's one thing that we can control right now, and that's our mindset. And she talks about how we can work with that, how we can control our mindset. That alone is worth registering for the conference, just to hearing Dr. McCauley there.
I couldn't agree with you more, and that really jumped out at me as something that I found to be so necessary. So just jumping back in and talking a little bit more about the whole recovery process, and I know you guys have just really explained it quite clearly. There is a concern because we know that some of the urban destinations, certainly like New York and other big cities that really depend on group business and meetings business. Any idea of what that looks like, and certainly what does that mean for people who are in the catering department? Is this something that they just wait out, or is there anything on the horizon that would offer some type of hope, because we need the banquet business?
Yeah, so I can speak to this, and Bob, feel free to pipe in here, but from a revenue optimization standpoint, this involves revenue, this involves sales, this marketing, catering. The entire team really needs to come together in times like this. Now, it's going to be different for different parts of the United States. There's going to be hot spots. There's going to be some markets that recover quicker than others.
Right.
This we know right now is, transient is going to come back first, especially the leisure component of that. And then business, and then the small groups. And, for those in the catering and banquets area, they really need to start planning and start working with the clients right now, getting them comfortable with the idea of holding a meeting and how they can logistically make it happen and be successful. I think that's probably the biggest challenge right now, and if they can overcome that with the client, they can be successful in that, especially as they look ahead to the fall. I'm hearing from other brands and management companies that they're starting to see some of that group business pick up now for the fall, and numbers may be smaller than what they traditionally are, but at least they're starting to come on the books now.
Yeah. That's a good summary, Tim. I would add to that, the sales side of our business, our members we've talked to repeatedly, and the biggest thing they've been really busy with, provided they've not been furloughed or laid off, is that they've been really busy rebooking a lot of that meetings and convention business. And there was talking about customer sentiment. Certainly for the group business, hotels look closely to the meeting planner community to identify what are you forecasting for how are you going to plan meetings and events going forward. And there was one survey that came out just yesterday where they surveyed the meeting planners on the last day of March, the last day of April, the last day of May. So we think of 3 consecutive months to benchmark the sentiment. And initially they asked them at the end of March, when do you think you'll start rebooking your meetings? At that point in time, they said, well, probably, June and July and August. At the end of the next month, they said it's probably going to be the fourth quarter of 2020. At the end of the third month, now they're saying we're not booking anything until 2021. So this timing of when the majority of planners saying they're going to start booking their events again keeps getting pushed forward. And if your hotel is designed to be a big group hotel, and you maybe have 70-80% of your business as group business, some of those hotels are already saying they're going to stay closed at least until this fall. So a hotel opening or closing is going to be a function of what's the mix of business or demand that you have in your particular market. If you're at JFK Airport, or if you're in suburban Cincinnati, or you're in the middle of Orlando, you have a different mix of business. So you've got to look at the demand and make your operation decisions then. And again, the marketing and revenue and salespeople should be part of that revenue generation team that's really designing the strategy at this point in time for the hotel and the hotel companies.
Well, we have just a couple of minutes left, so I want to close with 2 things. Number one, Bob, for those industry individuals that may not be aware of ROC Home, where can they go to quickly sign up, because the global conference is next week?
Absolutely. Just go to hsmai.org, or certainly just do a quick search for HSMAI ROC Home. There's a full toolkit that's totally complimentary for anybody, actually, from any industry. We welcome anybody to download that for free, or you can follow along on the website. There's a number of links to some of the videos like Dr. McCauley that are there. And then there's an option if you want to attend any of the live events that are being produced on the 17th. You can go into whatever time zone you're in or whatever region, but there's about over 20 different events going on that you can register for. One low price, $25. It's an open pass for any of the events in the world, and you can either view them live or view them afterwards recorded. So just go to hsmai.org or simply do a search for ROC Home, and you have full access to the toolkit. Just have to register and download it.
Thank you. And one more question would be, these are very intense times for so many people in different industries. And for those that are in the front line of finding ways to bring back the business, to connect with travelers, meeting planners, people traveling on leisure, those are your revenue generators, your sales and marketing teams. How can general managers and management companies be supportive? Because it's tough. And those that will be back on property trying to do the best that they can, and hopefully will take away great tools at ROC Home, but they're going to need support. It's a team effort. What would you say to that?
Tim, you want to go first?
As an industry, and I talked to a lot of colleagues that have been furloughed or laid off, or just feeling down about what's happening. We have to, and you mentioned it earlier, William, is it's going to come back, and we need to look to the future. And the future is not that far away. It's going to be a slow recovery, and for us, we need to stay together. We need to stay strong, reach out to each other, and give each other support. And through this time, and using an organization like HSMAI to do that has been tremendous for me, and I know tremendous for a lot of industry professionals.
Tim, I would agree. I think leadership that's going to be necessary during this recovery, which will be 2 or 3 years over time, and it'll be different for different types of hotels, but that leadership is going to require somebody who has a couple of key attributes. One's going to be empathy for the team, because it's going to be hard for those people, particularly if they're doing the jobs of 2 or 3 that didn't get rehired, for at least for the interim period of time. A lot of empathy. For the salespeople, the marketing people, and revenue people, it's going to be hard work, because for every sales call you may get 1 that says yes and 5 that say no, and that's can be very demotivating. So there's going to need to be a lot of empathy for those employees. Secondly, there's going to have to be empathy for those customers, because customers have a lot of anxiety by design, based upon what they're dealing with, the unknown. Traveling is usually an exciting experience, but people are going to be cautious initially in most cases, because there's so many unknowns, and there will continue to be unknowns until certainly a vaccine is found for this virus. So leadership during this time is going to need to be really strong. And the third thing that leadership needs to be reminded of is it's that revenue generation team that's going to lead you into and through the recovery. So make sure that they are listening to the customer and this customer sentiment, to understand what they want, how they want it, and how to best market to them to get them to come back to your hotels. So leadership will absolutely be key.
Well, guys, I want to just thank you for taking time to join me on Legitimate Matters. This has been a great discussion. I have been in the hospitality industry for quite a number of years, so it's a part of my DNA. I'm extremely passionate about it. I love travel, I love the industry, and I love what HSMAI is doing to really embrace the industry. And you guys are doing a great job. Tim, awesome. Tim will be back, by the way, in a couple of weeks, and we're going to do a deeper dive into revenue management. And next week, I've got a great guest on the show, Dr. LaJoyce Brookshire, who is a doctor of naturopathy, and she's doing a conference also on wellness. So Legitimate Matters is the place to be, and you could follow us on legitimatematters.com, subscribe on YouTube. Bob, Tim, thank you. You guys are awesome. And I will certainly be attending ROC at Home. I've already registered. I've got my toolkit, and I'm ready to go, guys.
Great, William. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. We're still here.
Did you want us to stay on or no?
No, we're good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hey, you're going to send me that link.